Welcome to B-Rate Politics. Please excuse any foul language or misinterpreted views. And for YouTube, I'm going to have to kind of tone it down a bit, But if you want to catch my real reactions, you can always hop on over at Patreon. I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 hour podcasts. And Monday podcasts are always free. So I encourage you to go check it out. If you get tired of, Biden screwing over progressives or, the conservatives going on and on about EF. I can't really say what that is because then YouTube would pounce on it. So if you get tired of those conversations, come on over. I try and cover some different topics usually. But anyways, a little bit more about me and to not really drag this video out. This is B-Rate Politics. My actual name's Braden, but kind of just nickname came across a while back. Used the term radio guy, so that's why often you'll hear myself refer to myself as that. I think it's got a good ring to it, But anyways, I started B-Rate Politics just because that, on one hand, I think people just get tired of the extremism. Think there's plenty of that out there, even if it is on YouTube. And at the same time, I want to cover what's really going on, right? Like that's great. You want to sit here and talk about Russia interference for the next 80 years, go right ahead. The Russia is about as much of a threat as, I don't know, they're about as much of a threat as Libya is. There you go. Yeah, there you go. There's a great comparison. The downfall of the United States via Libya. Those are kind of my reasonings. I'm kind of rushing this because there is something I do want to try and cover. I do a podcast through Patreon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday podcasts are always free. And on my off days, more or less, I'd like to maybe use YouTube to maybe throw a, nothing crazy, a little 6 or 7 minute video on a different topic I feel like I'm just not going to get to during the podcast and so forth. And at the same time, it's another great way to advertise B-Rate Politics. So, that's kind of the other main reason. Like I said, YouTube kind of has me more limited in my language and so forth. So I'm a bit more toned down. I'm a bit more relaxed, than how I can get on certain subjects if we start talking about our peace wars or freedom fighters and crap like that. So, I'm a bit more toned down and so forth. But anyways, so like I said, check it out. You can also find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I appreciate the interactions and so forth. If you find something funny or have a conversation, always willing to talk politics. People are always surprised by that. But anyways, what I wanted to kind of cover, ongoing theme. I actually covered it. This is where you'll hear me reference my podcast. But I covered it in my podcast, I think on Wednesday, more or less, a little bit of the COVID relief. And, I've always been, again, I'm probably in the minority group when I say that, what I was kind of dubbing the COVID cliff here. The real deadline is December 31st, but I would be very surprised if you really got a, second round of real legit COVID relief. I always said that, hey, this is probably, that $1,200 check you got, you better enjoy it because that's probably all you're really going to get, And so with that being said, right, with the first round already passing, we're already kind of, today's Saturday, and I'm just now getting this out. I'll probably have another video tomorrow. Maybe. We'll see. But Congress is still inching along In fact, there was a senator I saw just recently while I was making this, Senator Kennedy. He's a Republican from Louisiana. He was saying, yeah, I think we might be here till New Year's, really. And you might be asking yourself why. Well, because apparently everyone's like, well, Pat Toomey, he's a Republican senator from Pennsylvania. Pat Toomey is a fiscal conservative all of a sudden. He believes in fiscal responsibility. And he's on and on and on about how we need to have the constraints on the Federal Reserve. See, people don't realize that within the CARES Act, the Fed really increased its balance sheet and also had certain funds that were given to the Fed to distribute during the pandemic. And Pat Toomey wants to kind of put a kibosh on it. In fact, that's pretty much what would most likely happen. Congress isn't really the fastest on approving additional emergency funds, is what he kind of was like, well, I'm not saying we don't, Pat Toomey's like, I'm not saying we put a total kibosh on those programs, but, I'm just saying we'll have Congress vote on it. And it's like, oh, God. So, again, what do I as radio guy think about those programs? That's a whole different story. That would take longer than what this video really needs to run. I'm doing this as like, here's why I'm doing this. But at the same time, kind of wanted to quickly cover a subject, which was the COVID relief. Pat Toomey is about as much of a fiscal conservative as I am a leprechaun that has found a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Pat Toomey is not a fiscal conservative. In fact, that ideology really doesn't exist. Now, I'm in the wrong on it to some degree. Fiscal conservatives do manage to find themselves in Washington when there's a Democrat in the White House. But outside of that, they don't really exist. And in my opinion, if you don't hold a view in terms of consistency, if you're only going to half-ass your political views, then they're really not political views you really hold dear. So no, Pat Toomey is not a fiscal conservative. In fact, most of the Republicans in Congress are not fiscal conservatives. You can look at the last U.S. budget deficit to figure that out. Which, by the way, if nobody knows, that was $3.2 trillion. Also talked about that too in one of my podcasts weeks ago. Actually, probably over a month and a half ago by now. But there aren't fiscal conservatives in Congress. That's not a thing. And again, a lot of people would say, because it all died. And I guess you can make that argument somewhat. But personally, I always argue that fiscal conservatism never really died because it never really was a thing. Now, I'm not talking about fiscal conservatives in the Republican Party. I'm talking about fiscal conservatives, aka Republican representatives in government, in Congress, that pretend they are. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm a big fiscal values here, and you're running trillion, and even before COVID, they were already running $1 trillion deficits, and you're sitting here going, yes, Pat Toomey, big fiscal conservative. Oh, yes, big fiscal conservative. And at the same time, he's wanting to constrain the Fed. This is news to me. I've never heard Pat Toomey going on and on and on about Jerome Powell, a.k.a. who I call Gandalf. Never really heard him talk much about Janet Yellen. I'm not really sure where all this is coming in at, other than he doesn't want, and that's the main narrative being talked by the mainstream news. But in all honesty, I think Pat Toomey's full of it. I think he's just really bored, in all honesty, I understand. What most people don't realize, Pat Toomey isn't accountable to anybody anymore. He's not running for re-election come after 2022. He's retiring. He's already said that. So you've got a guy there that I think the Fed's a big issue right now. And, I think the Fed's been a little too independent. And it's like, that's what you decided to be independent on? Like, what? now, all of a sudden, like, where were you in the aftermath of 2008? Of course, now I know he's only been there, let's see, 2016, he might have only been there since 2010. He might have been in that 2010 wave for Republicans. I don't know if he's been there longer in Pennsylvania, but I know he's been there for 2 terms, because he just ran for re-election in 2016. So I'm pretty sure he's only been there since 2010. But even then, 2010 on, right? Why weren't you talking about quantitative easing in the Federal Reserve? He never did. He don't care. Why bring it up now? Probably the main notion that the media is talking about. But I just think he's bored. Part of why I'm covering is, like I said, will the country really get COVID relief? That's hard to say. It really is. I months ago, even after that first round of COVID relief passed, I was like, I don't know if there's ever really going to be a second round. I think it's going to be real tough to get it through Washington. But, hey, if they got to stay up there for Xmas, then that's the way it goes, serves them right, I think. But anyways, that's just me. I have a very different view of members of Congress, as you'll come to find out if you go listen to some of my podcasts, because for a good while when I first started doing this, I made every single podcast that I was doing on Patreon free. Now, not all of them are free now, but like I said, my Monday podcasts are free, and I usually cover 3 topics and so forth. And I think this video has gone on long enough. I can always go on and on my off days to talking about the Federal Reserve. But anyways, anyone who comes across this, like I said, I'm Braden, aka Radio Guy, and I hope you continue to watch, maybe just on YouTube, the videos I will plan to put out here and there, or check out my podcast here and there. I appreciate it, and hopefully everybody has a good Saturday. And thanks for listening to B-Rate Politics with Radio Guy.